Good evening and welcome to a WATD Political Forum. I'm your moderator, Christine James, and I'm joined by reporter Charles Mathewson. Hello. Monday Night Talk host Kevin Tachi. Hi. Along with Donna Rodriguez of PACTV asking questions. The election race is for Plymouth County District Attorney. We've got the incumbent Republican, Tim Cruz. Good evening.
Good evening.
And his challenger, Democrat Rahsaan Hall. They're both on the ballot for the general election this fall. Timing you all is our own Lenny Rowe, and we're joined by media partner PACTV. Our format is simple. We use it at every forum. We've asked the candidates to have prepared opening and closing statements ready. Opening statements no longer than 2 minutes. Closing statements 1 minute. And then we have a round of questions from reporters, and with the questions, we ask that you keep your answer to a minute. And again, we are strict with the timing. That's our timer over there, Lenny Rowe. Green is go. Yellow is 10 seconds. We know, even though this is Massachusetts. And red is stop. Then if not, I give you the 5-second grace countdown. If you're still talking, the bell. And then if you're still talking, we cut the mic. We're really strict about timing. Then we have my favorite part. We've got the lightning round. And that's where answers are either yes or no and 2 sentences tops. We find anyone running for office has a real problem with this, so it's something that we always try to incorporate in these forums. We chose opening and closing order out of the official WATD stand-in newsroom koozie, and that means we will begin with Tim Cruz, then go to Rahsaan Hall. We will flip that order at the end. Mr. Hall will go first, and then Tim Cruz. So good evening and welcome, everybody, and let's start now with opening statements.
Good evening. I want to thank WATD for putting this forum on today. Thank my opponent for showing up here tonight. And thank you for listening to us, people that are listening on the radio. My name's Tim Cruz, and for the last 21 years, I've been the Plymouth County District Attorney. And a little bit about me, I was born in Brockton, Massachusetts at Brockton Hospital. I grew up in West Bridgewater in the public school system. I went to Boston College undergrad, Suffolk Law, met my wife at Boston College undergrad. As a matter of fact, tomorrow was our 35th wedding anniversary, and I'm very lucky to be with her during that time period. But I've basically been a Plymouth County criminal trial lawyer for the better part of 40 years. I started in 1983 as an intern under Bill O'Malley. Bill was the DA back in 1983, and really cut my teeth there. Since that time, I was an assistant DA for 4 years, had my own practice for probably 12 years, did a lot of criminal defense work, did a lot of personal injury work, and I've been DA now for the last 21 years. And during that time also, I have been on numerous boards. I've been on Signature Healthcare, I've been on their board. I've been on the Marshfield Boys and Girls Club, where I still am, Old Colony Y in Brockton, the Alternative School in Bridgewater Raynham, making sure that I can try to do the best I can for the community. I think that's really what the part and parcel of the job is. It's being involved in your community. So the last 20 years, I've been able to, through the office, get more than $25 million to put through partnerships here in Plymouth County to try to help a lot of the issues that are going on. Issues on the front end, issues dealing with Project Safe Neighborhood and Weed and Seed, which we're dealing with violent crime in the urban communities. But what I really like to talk about is all the things we're doing with drug-endangered children and children who witness violence in their lives and trying to help them break the cycles of domestic violence, break the cycles of child abuse. We have a nationally accredited Children's Advocacy Center. It's been up and running now for about 15 years. On the back end, we certainly work. We have on the back end we have reentry programs for individuals coming back in, and I guess I'm running out of time. But in the middle, we have accountability, trying to hold people accountable for their actions. And what I'm asking for is people's vote, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the opening statement with Tim Cruz. Now we're going to go to the opening statement for Rahsaan Hall.
Thank you very much and good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to address the voters of Plymouth County and talk about the very important issues. My name is Rahsaan Hall. I'm a civil rights attorney, an ordained reverend, and a former prosecutor. I served for 8 years in the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, where I prosecuted gang, drug, assault, and homicide cases. And so I've seen what it is this system can do and how it can also create harm, particularly in certain communities. When we talk about the criminal legal system, a lot of people like to talk about law and order, but I'm reminded of the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, "Law and order exist to create justice, and when they fail at that, they become dangerous dams that block the flow of social progress." And that's what we've seen, particularly in poor communities and communities of color. And I'm running for district attorney to reclaim that spirit of justice and to ensure that we restore trust and public trust and accountability back to the office, raise the level of transparency and integrity, and ensure that we are providing justice for everyone in Plymouth County, regardless of where you live, how much money you make, or the color of your skin. I look forward to talking to the listeners this evening about what it is I plan to do when I become district attorney and all of the ways that we can reclaim that spirit of justice here in the county. And I ultimately will ask for your vote.
Thank you very much. That's the opening statement for Rahsaan Hall. Now let's go to our questions. Let's begin with Donna Rodriguez from PACTV.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'd like to start with a general question for both of you this evening, and I'll start with Rahsaan. From your point of view, what do you see, and this is beyond the drug addiction problem that we're seeing still, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing this county? And if you were elected DA, what would your plans be to address those problems?
Thank you for the question, Don. I see one of the biggest challenges facing this county and where it relates to the criminal legal system is the lack of resources and investment in addressing things on the front end, as well as the lack of transparency from the system to know what types of outcomes that we're getting, not just for a few, but for everyone in this county. And as district attorney, I would be sure to make sure that we have robust policies. And I think it's important for your listeners and the voters of Plymouth County to know that whenever a district attorney's office is seeking to have consistency in its outcomes, it needs clear and dedicated policies that govern the way that the assistant district attorneys shall conduct themselves and have some level of analysis and data collection that informs the outcomes and practices instead of being guided by people's instincts.
Thank you. And Tim, the same question for you, please. Beyond the issues of drug addiction, what do you see currently as the primary challenges? And if you were elected to continue in your office, what are your plans for addressing them?
Well, I think the issues kind of remain the same, and we're dealing with many different issues. As I said in my opening, the $25 million, we're dealing with front-end issues, working and making partnerships in our community. I think we make a huge difference on the front end. But at the same time, I think recidivism is a big issue on the back end. So therefore, we need to continue to have reentry programs, training like we have the Sheriff's Department right now. We have Corey-friendly job fairs, helping people try to get real jobs, electricians, trying to get plumbers down there, trying to make sure we can help the people on the back end. So when they come back in, they're not going to recidivate and get back into the court system. That's been going on for too long of a period of time. Getting that information, I think, is really important. But the front end stuff is really the stuff that's applicable to me, dealing with the kids, and we've been doing it for a really long time here in Plymouth County. Kids who witness violence, Handle with Care program. All that stuff is at PlymouthDA.com. It's way too many things for me to talk about tonight. Go on PlymouthDA.com. It's all transferable. It's all accountable. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thanks. Charles Mathewson, question for the candidates.
Those of us who spend time in court and reading police logs know what the DA does, but I don't think most people do. Could you please tell us the 3 or 5 top jobs of the district attorney? Rahsaan.
Well, in 2018, the ACLU, where I used to work, ran a public education program called What a Difference a DA Makes, because we realized that an overwhelming number of people in Plymouth County didn't know, or the Commonwealth didn't know what it was a DA does. And so primarily they are a minister of justice. They ensure that the prosecution of criminal cases are handled in a fair, just, and equitable way. Secondly, they work closely with law enforcement in conducting investigations and ensuring that those who have caused harm or disruption in our communities are held accountable, whether that is through the prosecution of a case or it can also be through diversionary programs. And lastly, in addition to what happens in courts, there's a way that they can influence the legislature, either to further criminalize conduct or find more harm reduction approaches. And so I think it's important for the listeners and voters of Plymouth County to know that that is something that I would use my platform to do, is to educate and inform more of the public about the role.
Tim Cruz, after 21 years, do you know what a DA does?
Well,
I think he might.
I hope so. And a lot of them are overlapping what Rahsaan just said. I mean, you're talking about legislation is a very important part of what we do, going up to Beacon Hill and talking to our legislators and trying to talk about what works, what doesn't work. But really what you're doing as the district attorney, in every case, you're trying to get to a just result for all the people. But at the same time, you're also running probably the biggest law firm in the county of Plymouth. So therefore, you have 60-some-odd lawyers that work for you. You have an administrative staff of probably another 50 or so. You have state police that work in your office, and trying to administer the day-to-day operations, getting the resources that you need so you can all do your job, so you can make sure that you go down that path, and you make sure you get justice for everybody, every person. It doesn't matter who you are or where you live. We need to continue to work together. And when you do that, you get good results like we've been getting here in Plymouth County.
I'd like to drill a little bit on that. Neither of you mentioned how you choose which cases to prosecute. Let's reverse the order. Tim?
Well, the cases, first and foremost, the cases come to us through the court system. So what will happen is the DA is in charge of all the unattended deaths that occur, all the homicides, all the major drug investigations through their state police unit. However, when you're dealing with the lower cases coming in through the regular police departments, they'll make the determinations as to what to charge people with. Sometimes they go to show cause hearings, which we don't find out about, and then eventually they'll work their way up to the arraignment system. If it's going to go to Superior Court, then obviously you have to review those very serious cases, make sure you have the evidence to go forward, make sure you have the wherewithal to go forward and go to the grand jury and bring those cases in. I think that, as we continue to go and look at the cases that we have, we also need to continue to weed out cases. And right now, we're part of a program right now we've got from the trial court system, in which we're weeding out cases at the show cause level. We're one of two DA's offices in the Commonwealth right now doing that. I think we can weed cases out and make sure we can continue to do our job.
Rahsaan.
Sure. I think one of the things that we need to look at is which cases should be weeded out. There's a case in particular of the man named John C. Williams, who was prosecuted by this office and tried to a not guilty, even in the face of evidence that the crime that was alleged did not occur. Someone who works in our communities to service at-risk children, and the individual who he allegedly assaulted said it didn't happen. DCF said it didn't happen. The video evidence said it didn't happen. And those are the types of cases that are being brought by this office, and the resources and taxpayer dollars are being wasted on cases like that and many others. And so there needs to be more scrutiny on the front end, particularly in the district court, where the DA's office just receives what police are bringing into the office. And it's important for the voters of Plymouth County to know that these are the types of screening in cases that I would screen out. And when we're investing in grand jury investigations and working with law enforcement, we're going to make sure that we're going after the people that are causing the most significant harm and disruption in our county.
Tim, I'll give you a minute to respond to that about this case that he brought up.
Yeah,
Rahsaan?
I mean, first and foremost, there's video evidence of what occurred that day. I wasn't in the courtroom that day. I'm not sure if Mr. Hall was either, but obviously you have a case that goes to trial, gets over the rail, gets over the directed verdict standard, and you're going to go forward from that. The judge didn't direct it out. He was found not guilty. That happens in the criminal justice system. Many cases go forward and people are found not guilty. That's the greatness of our system. I think we have a great system in order right now. And obviously you have cases that are brought in. People have their testimony. It goes in front of in this instance, a jury is my understanding, and they found the guy not guilty, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Any other follow-up, Charlie?
No,
Okay.
I-
Kevin Tachi, questions for the candidates?
I'm going to go back to the opioid and drug epidemic. This has been a long-standing issue that law enforcement, state and local officials, and public safety personnel have to continue to work through, especially attempting to eliminate illegal distribution of substances as harsh as fentanyl. From a law enforcement and prosecution side of the problem standpoint, do you believe the justice system is doing enough to prevent drug dealing, whether it's imposing stricter penalties or lengthier prison sentences, or should there be another approach taken?
Let's start with Tim.
I mean, you have a situation where you have a terrible problem coming in with all these illegal drugs that are flowing into our country, fentanyl, carfentanil. It's poison on the streets. So therefore, you need to make sure that the people who are dealing those drugs, you have to make sure you go after them, not the users, but the people who are dealing the drugs. At the same time, you have a large group of people who are addicted to these drugs. You have to get them the help and the resources, which is why we have drug courts and we have all the other specialized courts right now to help the individuals so that they can go down that path and get out of these issues. But right now, I mean, we have to find ourselves, we have some places that want to have open-air drug markets, like Mass Cass in Boston. I mean, right now, it's still illegal to distribute drugs. You can't have an area such as that where people are going to be distributing drugs and they're handing out smoke pipes and things such as that. We need to make sure that we're going after the individuals who are selling the drugs and putting the poison on the street, and at the same time reduce the supply by making sure we can go do our Plymouth County Drug Abuse Task Force, PCO, and the other many things that we do.
Just a follow-up, but do you feel as though the justice system is doing enough? Are the judges doing enough to keep some of these big-time dealers behind bars, or at least making sure that they're not going to reoffend?
Well, the judges have minimum mandatories that they can use to keep people off the streets, the people that are dealing with things such as that. But I think there's always more that can be done. But we're looking at, once again, we're looking at a societal issue, and we're talking about in the criminal justice system. There's many other issues and many other moving parts with this stuff.
I don't know that the system itself is the appropriate place to place our focus on. I think we need to look at the supports external to the system. Yes, there are people who are responsible for distributing large amounts of some of the more serious drugs in our community, and they can be held accountable. But what are the resources that are being made available to individuals to disrupt the cycle of addiction and substance use disorder, make sure that people are getting the help and the treatment that they need? And I think it's important for Plymouth County voters to know that partnering with service providers and teaching curriculum about how to avoid substance use disorder is something that I am committed to, as opposed to standing in the way of making investments in those types of programs and working with partners on the ground.
How about the people who are dealing it? What's your thought on dealing with being able to apprehend or at least deal with the individuals who are distributing this to individuals?
Yeah, I think there's an important distinction between people who are distributing, because distribution doesn't necessarily mean sales, and it could be individuals who are distributing for the sake of supporting their own habit. There are also individuals who are in it for the resale value or the retail aspect of it. We have to be able to distinguish and make sure that the people who are struggling with substance use disorder are getting the treatment and the services that they need, so that they're not recidivating or not causing more harm in community, and that we're connecting people with the appropriate programming.
You're listening to a political forum here on WATD. It's the race for Plymouth County District Attorney. We've got the incumbent Republican Tim Cruz and his challenger Democrat Rahsaan Hall. My question is, do you support forensic genealogy as a tool in criminal investigations? Rahsaan Hall.
To the extent that we are using forensic evidence, we need to make sure that it has been well vetted amongst the or peer reviewed. And so I think there are a history and a legacy of forensic technologies that have initially been adopted and affirmed to subsequently be identified as not necessarily junk science, but problematic. And so I think it's important that one of the things that is a concern is making sure that there is integrity and transparency, and that there is an investment in ensuring that the technologies that are being used to secure convictions in our system are based on well-vetted science. And not whatever is the trend of the day. We want to make sure that those types of issues are not disproportionately impacting communities of color and poor people.
Let me just ask you a follow-up question. Do you feel that the science of forensic genealogy is at a point where you would trust it? I know that that was one of the key things that got the Golden State Killer, the serial killer in California. That was something that was how they were able to get to this man who had committed 20 or 30 years of atrocities. Do you have confidence in we are at that point where it's not junk science?
I think there is value in using DNA evidence and forensic science, but genealogical science is still being explored.
Okay. Tim Cruz, do you support using forensic genealogy in criminal investigations?
Absolutely. It's something that has been effective. It has been vetted out. It's been working in other states, and we have an obligation and responsibility to the victims in our community who are dealing with the pain and suffering of having lost somebody. So if we have some information that we can use, we need to make sure that we do that and go to the extent that we can. And we've been doing it here in our county. We've been doing it for a long time right now. And I've talked to the lawyers out in California that had the Golden State Killer case, and talked to them and how well it worked out there, and how they were able to put closure for those victims in those cases over the course of the last 30 or 40 years, those horrific cases that were going on over there. So yes, obviously, with any sort of science, you have to make sure it's vetted out. You have to make sure it's working. We have to make sure that we can rely on it. And I think that's been done with genetic genealogy, and I think we should continue down that path.
So just let me follow up like I did with Rahsaan
Sure.
Hall. So 30 seconds, you think the science is at the level when you think it's been vetted and you think it's appropriate to use?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Let's go back to Donna Rodriguez. Questions for the candidates?
Thank you. I'd like to, in reading both of your points and preparing for tonight, there are a couple of quotes that, I find can be very general, and I'd like to hear more of what's behind them and what instead of implying what you're intending. So I'm going to start with Tim first. And Tim, I read an interview with you where you talked about issues you have with progressive DAs and progressive candidates, and it was suggested that you thought that they've been derelict in their duties to keep constituents safe. Can you expand on that and give us details about what you meant with that?
When we have progressive district attorneys across America, and that entire philosophy is failing all around the country, whether it be San Francisco, LA, Chicago, all the things on the East Coast. So therefore, to me, those defund the police strategies, those I'm not going to prosecute a certain amount of cases, certain kinds of cases, that doesn't work. It's proven that it doesn't work. And it doesn't work anywhere. So therefore, I think that you need to make sure that we do what we've been doing, case-by-case basis, go through your cases, make sure you talk to individuals, you have lawyers on the front end, because allegedly they're not prosecuting cases because of the fact they want to focus on more violent crime on the back end. Well, you need to have enough people and enough resources to make sure that you can do your job and make sure that you uphold your constitutional oath. Not just to prosecute the cases I like or prosecute the cases I don't like, it's to deal with all the cases. And you may be able to look at something saying, I'm going to divert that, pretrial probation, whatever it's going to be, but you need to make sure that you look at all those things. So I think there's a litany of things that the progressive DAs have done across America that really are causing anarchy and chaos.
Thank you. And Rahsaan, I'd like to ask you, you've said frequently, justice demands better, and that you're running to reclaim the spirit of justice. I'm not clear when I hear that if you are referring specifically to the Plymouth DA's office and issues you have with that office, or specifically what you mean. Could you be more clear with that, please?
Certainly. I think, as I said at the outset, talking about King's quote about law and order exists to create justice. Justice is not wrongful convictions. Justice is not unsolved homicides in certain communities as opposed to the rest of the county. Justice is not cases that should not be prosecuted. Making sure that people have an experience in this criminal legal system, whether they're a victim or a survivor of crime or someone who is being prosecuted, that is fair and just, regardless of the neighborhood you live in, the town that you live in, the money that you make, or the color of your skin. And that is something that we've seen coming out of this district attorney's office. And it's important for folks to know that as district attorney, I would ensure that we are following the evidence, the data, and the science. And as much as my opponent talks about what's happening in all these other jurisdictions with progressive prosecutors, nobody talks about Boston, where there was a decline to prosecute policy and crime was down.
I'll talk about Boston.
Okay, you've got 30 seconds.
There's a study out there that talks about that allegedly was going to uphold that do not prosecute standard that was in Boston. Well, in actuality, what it really shows is that during COVID, it went from 2000 to 2019 when Dan Conley was the DA looking at the case-by-case basis. During that time period of COVID, which millions of people weren't going to Boston over that time period, cases across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts were down 25.76% according to the trial court. They were down everywhere. It's got nothing to do with the do not prosecute list.
Okay. Do you want another 30 seconds to respond to that, Rahsaan?
Yes, and that data showed that those not prosecuting those certain offenses under Conley, which is an office that I served under as a prosecutor, led to less recidivism.
Okay. Any more follow-ups?
Nope, thank
Okay.
you.
Charles Mathewson, questions for the candidates?
You've both served as ADAs, assistant district attorneys. They are underpaid, underappreciated. I'm sure that you experienced that when you were ADAs. And thank you for mentioning Bill O'Malley. We all treasure his memory, I believe.
Great guy.
What would you do to keep the ADAs that you have? It's a stepping stone to, private practice in Tim's case, or moving on to other things in Rahsaan's case. What would you do to keep ADAs and not have them move along, Rahsaan?
Yeah, I served for 8 years as a prosecutor in Suffolk County, both in district court and in superior court, and I saw any number of cases and dealt with wide-ranging caseloads and the stresses of the office. So I understand what it is that assistant district attorneys go through. And one of the things that I think is important is to create an environment where people feel affirmed and invested in. And so making sure that there is appropriate training for the assistant district attorneys and making sure that there are professional development opportunities. I think the voters of Plymouth County should know that that doesn't currently exist in this office. I've talked to several former assistant district attorneys who said that they didn't feel invested in or properly trained or that they had professional development opportunities. And there was a substantial turnover that is attributed to more than just the natural attrition of a district attorney's office.
Tim?
I completely disagree. There's been more training in our office than probably any other office, DA's office in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And when you're dealing with individuals who are trying to keep their jobs and trying to do their jobs, it's a challenge. One of the biggest issues with ADAs over the years has been salary. For the last 4 or 5 years, all the DAs from the Mass DA has been working to raise the bottom level salary. 5 years ago, it was $37,000. This fall, it'll be $68,000. It's still not a ton of money, but it's enough money to pay your law school bills, your college bills. Lots of young men and young women move on because they want to make money, they want to get married, they want to buy a home. That's what I did many, many years ago, and moved on from the DA's office because of the lack of monies that we were able to get. I think that's one of our biggest issues, and the training that we have, like I said, we just did a gun training for all the prosecutors and also people in the staff that want to learn about firearms here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We need to keep doing that, and we've been doing it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Kevin Tauchi, questions for the candidates here?
We've sat here discussing issues and philosophies. I think the one thing we should probably talk about is the victims and survivors. Is this Plymouth County DA's office doing enough to provide support and programs for those victims and survivors of crimes? We'll start with you, Tim.
Well, I mean, obviously, many times with the victims that you're dealing with, it's the worst time of their lives. When you talk to the young ADAs and the young victim witness advocates who are dealing with them, you know, it's important for them to be on their best when people are at the worst time of their life. So what sources help can you get them, whether it be a domestic violence case, and make sure that they get the restraining orders that they need or the help that they need, or try to get them resources that they can get in order to survive on a day-to-day basis. It's such a challenge for that. You know, we have our Children's Advocacy Center where we're dealing with, last year, more than 1,000 kids in our county were hurt in our county. To me, one of the biggest things we can do, and what we've been doing for a long time now, is making sure we get services to those kids so we can stop the cycles of domestic violence, stop the cycles of child abuse. Today's victim could be tomorrow's perpetrator. We get them the help that they can, and that stops. And therefore, we have an entire array of people at our CAC, which is located in Brockton, which we partner with BAMSI, Brockton Area Multi-Service, making sure we can get the resources for those kids as best as we can.
Okay.
Same question.
Yeah, in my experience as a prosecutor, I've sat with the victims of crime and family members who have lost loved ones to homicide, and so I understand what it's like to work closely with them and help them navigate this system that can be cold and sterile sometimes. And I think it's important to make sure that we are investing in making sure that victims and survivors have enough resources, care, support, and guidance as possible through this system, and whether that's more training for victim witness advocates or more investment in resource distribution for some of those victims. But I think it's also important for voters of Plymouth County to know that this is a district attorney's office that has prosecuted victims of domestic violence. Shauna Fabiano, who was a woman who was being abused by her partner and secretly recorded that abuse and statements about that abuse, and that was in violation of the state wiretap statute. This office could have chosen not to prosecute somebody who was being a victim of domestic violence.
Okay. Tim, I'll give you a minute to respond to that.
I'm so glad that's been brought up because my office didn't prosecute it. My office, we had a conflict with the case, we sent the case out. Another DA's office completely handled that. When that was investigated by Channel 5, we told them that, and they didn't put that part of the story out there. So when you have that DV case with a male and a female back and forth, whatever the cross complaints may be, we weren't involved in the complaints. We weren't involved in the issuance of the complaints. We weren't involved in the prosecution. So it's not our DA's office.
Okay. Another minute for you, Rahsaan.
They arraigned that case. They could have dismissed it prior to arraignment.
Tim?
I don't believe I actually don't know that. I can't answer the question to the arraignment, but we did send it out, so they had to probably put it on for the next day for somebody else. But at the end of the day, that was because we were sending the case out and we didn't make the call on the case.
Another 30 seconds, or?
Again, when we understand domestic violence, we know that how abusers can manipulate and abuse the system, and that's something that they should have been aware of and prevented.
We're going to go to a quick break and come back. You're listening to a political forum here on WATD. Going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes right here on 95.9 WATD. That's right. Welcome back to a political forum. The race is for district attorney here in Plymouth County. We've got the incumbent, Republican Tim Cruz, and his challenger, Democrat Rahsaan Hall. Now, before the break, we were in a series of questions with Kevin Tachi, and you had some follow-ups.
Yeah, just a follow-up was, I mean, the original point was in regards to support for victims and survivors. So I would ask Rahsaan, taking a look at the programs that the DA's office currently has, do you feel it's sufficient, or are there things that you would improve upon in regards to taking care of victims and survivors?
I think there's always room for improvement in any program that exists, particularly with victims of gender-based violence, ensuring that there are opportunities to connect them with resources of service, particularly in cases where there may be evidentiary barriers to overcoming to presenting and moving forward on some of the cases. It's always important to make sure that there is a healing-centered focus for folks, even if justice doesn't come in the form of a conviction.
Tim, your thoughts? Do you feel as though you're on the cutting edge when it comes to programs and services?
I think we are as far as we can, but I do agree that things are always changing. It's a moving target all the time. There's always new things out there, and as you do your trainings and bring people in and learn more about various things, you want to make sure that they're viable. There's something you can bring into your community, and can you also help anybody? Whatever, it doesn't matter your gender, your ethnicity, whatever. We need to help everybody. That's really the goal of the DA's office in trying to get that justice. So I think you can always tweak things, and that's why all the DAs share things, not just in Massachusetts, but across the country.
Okay. As a district attorney, you're the top law enforcement official in Plymouth County. Is that correct? I wasn't sure if statutory, is it the sheriff or is it the district attorney?
I believe that it is.
Okay.
Although the sheriffs may give you another opinion.
I believe I have had one of those. Of course, so your relationship with local police departments is key to, I guess, prosecution, looking at cases, and then what the relationship is. I was sent some information here, and I want to confirm some rumors or confirm whether it's true or not. Rahsaan Hall, the information that I was sent said that you were somebody who wanted to abolish the police. Is that accurate?
It's easy to point to how this system uses incarceration and punishment to bring about justice, but it's harder to look at how the system has caused forms of harm. To the extent that I've ever talked about abolition, it's been about casting a vision for a world that we can live in that keeps us safe, that doesn't over-rely on these types of services, because we're addressing the underlying issues like substance use disorder, mental health issues, poverty, and trauma. It's not burn it all down and let people do what they want, but building out the systems that support people and their needs. And so the voters of Plymouth County should know that I'm a person that is committed to following the evidence, following the data, and not just being an ideologue, but making investments in the programs and services that address some of the root causes so that we can have services and systems that support us without doing the same type of harm as the current systems do.
So you don't believe in defunding the police and just getting rid of them? That's not in your agenda if you're elected to district attorney?
Well, one, the district attorney can't defund the police. Two, I've never called for the defunding of police. And three, there are examples of things that police are called to do that they're not properly trained or equipped to do, but because they're the only representative of municipal government that's available 24/7, they end up having to do.
Okay. Tim Cruz, you've got a relationship with all the departments, with 27 communities in Plymouth County. What do you think needs to change with the way police handle things and with your office?
Well, I mean, when you look at the things that we've been doing for a long time now, especially with the drug addiction issue, because I think that, we're dealing with the criminal justice system is certainly the depository of every issue going on out there, mental health, drug issues, poverty. That's where it all ends up. And many times the criminal justice system is ill-suited to deal with it. And the police officers and the police women and the people in the front lines, they're not mental health workers. And they show up at these crime scenes, and for every fatal or non-fatal overdose that a police officer shows up at, there's probably 3 or 4 mental health issues. We need to get them more training, and I think that they've got the training. Right here in Plymouth County, we have Plymouth County Hub, which is dealing with high at-risk individuals who are dealing with, prior to their breakdown, whether it be mentally or them overdosing, getting them resources prior to that. That's it comes out of the Plymouth County Outreach, it comes out of our task force, it's been around for 7 years. We've been working to deal with many different issues here, and I think we're really, once again, leading the charge on that.
Now, let me ask you a follow-up. Do you think some of the police officers that you deal with to handle these things, you talk about mental health issues, do you think they should be replaced with another type of worker or outreach person instead of police responding to some of these crimes?
Yeah, I mean,
Or
no.
calls, rather?
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, some departments right now are taking mental health workers with them on ride-alongs, but that's a very expensive process. I know Plymouth is doing it. I believe Duxbury is doing it right now, and that's great. And if the resources are there, but the police officers, that's a tough job right now. And those men and women put it on the line for all of us every single day. And they know that I understand that. They also know that if a police officer crosses the line, that we have to deal with them in a different fashion. They understand that, and that's what we've been doing here.
Okay, thank you. Donna Rodriguez, questions for the candidates?
Thank you. Both of you are obviously very accomplished, you're very knowledgeable, you're dedicated professionals who have given service to the communities and people of the Commonwealth for years. So I'm curious about how you want voters to weigh your qualifications, and what do you want them to look at, and what do you want them to consider in a DA when they're making a decision at the voting booth. And I believe it's Tim's turn to start. Is that correct, Christine?
Yes.
Okay.
I think you need to look at a proven track record of success. So therefore, let's look what's going on here in Plymouth County. In the last 10 years, juvenile cases are down 48%. The House of Correction numbers are down almost 79% in the last 10 years. The Department of Correction, which is all the serious cases go, the murderers, rapists, things such as that, they're down another 49%. And at the same time, our drug overdoses here in Plymouth County we're the only county where they're going down right now, the fatal opiate overdoses. You need to look at everything that's going on with that whole mixture right there. How do you get in front? How do you help the kids that need the help? How do you give all the different services that are out there? When you do, and also in the violent crime, the city of Brockton is down 20%, 35% less people being shot, 25% people shootings are down. At the same time, while all these numbers are going down, we're also driving the numbers down, and we're not like the rest of the country, which is basically you turn the television on and you see these terrible things going on all across America. We're driving our numbers down, we're doing it the right way, and that's what we continue to do.
Thank you. Rahsaan, what do you want voters to consider when making a choice for DA this November?
Looking at my record of advocacy and showing up on behalf of the most marginalized and dispossessed people in our communities, looking at my record as a prosecutor, working closely with law enforcement and victims and survivors of crimes, and working closely with community organizations to develop a public safety agenda. It's also important for the voters of Plymouth County to know that for all of the things that my opponent has claimed are driving crime down, they're a result of some of the progressive policies that I've advocated for as an advocate. The Criminal Law Reform Bill of 2018, the Police Reform Bill of 2020. If somehow the things that I propose to do are so-called dangerous and progressive, how is it that this office can claim the victory from some of those same policies?
Okay, I'll give you a minute to respond to that.
Well, to take credit for the criminal law reform when you're not a legislator, I think that's a big step. There was a lot of different things, and there was a lot of moving parts on that. And some DAs were for some DAs were against some, just like everybody was. Nobody was for the entire package. So when you get the best pieces of it, when you do legislate, when you go up and you talk to the legislators and the senators and the reps and all that, you have to give them your best pitch to make sure that you can say, here's what the deal is, here's what will happen if this occurs. And you let them understand that there's some things are fraught with peril. You have to make sure you do it the right way. So to say that all the numbers here, it's not just me, it's the police, it's the fire, it's the EMS, it's all the different partnerships we have here in the county, and there's a ton of them. PlymouthDA.com, go on that. When you look at everything together, that's what's driving it down, not somebody going, I agree with criminal justice reform 5 years ago.
Any follow-ups?
Thank
Okay,
you.
Charles Mathewson?
The most common factor in the cases that we see, the criminal cases that we see, drugs or alcohol. There's a common phrase that the press will raise when a police officer says so-and-so did this or that horrible thing, and we say, oh, was alcohol involved? Yes. Forget for a moment the statutory limits of the DA's office. What, in a perfect world, would you do to address addiction, drugs, alcohol, any type of substance abuse, up to including legalize it all? Rahsaan.
I think we need to make a greater investment in education and prevention and counseling. We can't take the outdated approach of the war on drugs that criminalized every aspect and disproportionately impacted communities of color. We're starting to see a better approach now in the midst of the opioid crisis because different communities are being impacted by that. I think it's important to know, for voters to know, that I'm going to make an investment in finding harm reduction approaches to dealing with people who are struggling with substance use disorder, trying to divert more people out of the system to make sure that they get the treatment and the services that they need, and partner with organizations that are going to do the early education work and curriculum development to prevent young people in particular from getting engaged in substances.
Tim?
I think, one of the biggest issues we deal with is unfortunately with parents and people making sure they can direct their kids in the right direction. We have a lot of kids who are high at risk. The other issue is that you're dealing with a lot of these addictions are, I believe it's part of your system. It's something you can't control. So you have people that are going after alcohol, you're going people after these various drugs. We need to make sure that we continue to go and train the people that we've been training, making the changes that we've been making, and at the same time let them understand that when people are going to go out and sell those drugs, not use them, they're going to go to jail. If they're going to go to drug court, which we have, which is pretty much what everything that my opponent just talked about. You have drug court right there, which has been a great success, but we need to have more of those. And we have a drug court in every court in Plymouth County, Plymouth, Brockton, Wareham, and Hingham. And we need to continue, we focus those in there, helping the people that we can help when we can help them.
Tachi, questions?
Gun violence is still prevalent in society these days, and it's been brought up here. And we've had the occasional cases here in Plymouth County. What is your stance on this issue? Is there enough being done through this office to prevent crimes, take guns off the streets, prosecute individuals who commit crimes with weapons?
Let's start with Tim.
Tim?
Well, obviously, you need to take crime guns off the street, and the guns aren't necessarily coming from Plymouth County. That's one of the issues, is we have guns coming from all over various states where they have different gun laws than rather than we have. When you look at our gun laws here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I think they're some of the best in the country. We have, in working with Project Safe Neighborhood and other federal grants who are dealing with trying to deal with violence in the urban communities, we have a priority first firearm prosecution team, which has been moving those cases quicker through the system in district court so they don't languish, making sure the guns can get analyzed, make sure they're a firearm within the meaning of Chapter 140, make sure you can go forward with those cases, making sure you get them off the streets, because the guns are going hand in hand with the drugs, and they bring so much violence and destruction to the community. And we also need to make sure that people understand that we're not going to be sitting around with that. So the guns are coming from everywhere, and I'm talking about the crime guns, the guns that are being used in the commission of crime, and I think that's a big difference.
Same question.
Yeah, there's always more that can be done to intervene in the apprehension and prosecution of gun crimes. I think it is a significant problem, particularly in poor communities. But we also have to look at what's not being done. We talked about cases that are left languishing. I think it's important for voters to know that this office is investing resources in prosecuting individuals like Andre Burgess, who pointed his finger at a police officer, and now the case has been open for 2 years and was charged with threatening a police officer for pointing his fingers at an officer in the shape of a gun, which he denies, one, but two, even if that is the case, it's not a threat. For someone to lose their job, lose their ability to intervene in the life of young people because he was volunteering, now he can't do that because he has an open case for something that was frivolous and should not have been brought in the first place.
Tim, would you like a minute to respond to that?
Well, I'd love more than that. However, I can't talk about open cases. Open cases that are there, it's not my bailiwick to talk about them. I would just say this, that we do the best that we can every day with these various cases, especially the cases that came out of the riots that were occurring in the Brockton at about that time a couple of years back. Do the best you can with them and go forward from there. So, I can't talk about open cases, and I wouldn't bring it up, and I don't think it's appropriate to talk about.
Okay. This is from one of our listeners who sent in the question, what is your position on the prison construction moratorium bill currently in the Massachusetts legislature? Let's start with Rahsaan.
There's a statement or an anecdote, if you build it, they will come. If we're trying to reduce the footprint of the criminal legal system, let's not build out more infrastructure. There's plenty that already exists. We can begin with closing some of the institutions that already exist and shifting population. We have to think about getting to some of the root causes that lead to people being incarcerated in the first place, and the amount of money that gets spent on that is diverting away from the things that address root causes. I think it's also important for the voters of Plymouth County to know that I would be working collaboratively to develop the data and analysis of that data to ensure that we're making sure that we're getting the best outcomes instead of just continuing to prosecute every case that comes through our office and then ultimately send people to these new facilities. We want to make sure that we're analyzing data to make sure we're avoiding racial disparities and getting the appropriate outcomes for people who are coming through this system.
Tim, what is your position on the prison construction moratorium bill currently in the Massachusetts legislature?
Well, I mean, to say that every case that comes through the system, people are being prosecuted and going to jail just isn't so. In Massachusetts, that's just not happening. And as we sit here right now, down the Plymouth County House of Correction, there's roughly 80 people doing time right now down the Plymouth County House of Correction. From 10 years back, there was about 400 or 500. The numbers have gone down dramatically. They've gone dramatically down the DOC. So therefore, and now they're going to be closing Cedar Junction, is my understanding. They're closing Cedar Junction. And we have a lot of space, I believe, in a lot of the jails right now, whether it be House of Corrections or other state facilities that are already open. I'm not sure if you need a new prison at this point, to tell you the truth. I don't know the numbers, but I think that, if I was asked that question and I had the data in front of me regarding that, I'd make the determination that where we are right now, we don't need it because it's in Plymouth County. The numbers are going down, the crime's going down, and it's working. So why do we need to build and spend more money on another jail? I'm just not aware of that.
Okay, let me ask you both a follow-up question then. Same listener who's a regular listener said, are you familiar with restorative justice and how will your office incorporate this into the work of the DA's office going forward? Rahsaan?
I'm familiar with restorative justice. I've participated in restorative justice circles. I've even sat in prison with some of the men that I sent to prison in restorative justice circles and see the values and benefits of restorative justice. And when I become the next district attorney for Plymouth County, I'll make sure that we're investing in partnering with the organizations that are doing that restorative justice work, RRJ or the Transformational Prison Project.
Okay, same question, Tim Cruz.
Well, restorative justice, I think, has many different meanings. And one of the meanings I think it would be the great programs that we're working in conjunction with the Sheriff's Department down at the jail right now, where you're training individuals who are already in custody when they're going to be released, help them with their anger management, drug issues, getting a job, getting a good job, having core-friendly job fairs with the mayor and the sheriff that we've been doing in Brockton for the last couple of years, helping men and women get back on the right path so that they can go down in the correct direction. The restorative justice of sitting down, I've not talked to many people in my 20 years as DAs that are interested in sitting down, unfortunately, with some of the people who have harmed them. But that may be a process that for some people, we've done it a couple of times, and I think that we can be in a position to continue to do that if they want it.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Donna Rodriguez again.
Thank you.
Questions?
So earlier you were talking, things have come up about public education, there's been mention of transparency, and I think public engagement really has a lot to do with people understanding the DA's office, the work of the DA's office. In previous positions, in what you're doing now and what you hope for the future for the DA's office, talk to us a little bit about the importance, from your point of view, of public engagement and what you've done or what you plan to do. And I think, Tim, it's your turn to start first.
I think we always try to engage with the public and let them know what we're doing. That's why you do press releases and you try to get the word out regarding here's what we're doing. It's not just about throwing people in jail. It's about helping the people on the front end and dealing with the children so we can keep out of the criminal justice system, whether it be drug-endangered children, whether it be kids with adverse childhood experiences, whether it be kids who need help. They need a hand up. That's what they need. So we need to help those kids, and I think when you try to get that out there, you put it out there, and sometimes, unfortunately, in the media, it doesn't really carry that well. I don't know why. You would hope that the good things that are going on in the community are something that could be a very positive thing to understand that what we're doing here is helping these kids stay out of the system and also on the back end helping people go through the system. I think that we need to make sure that we get the word out. And like I said, PlymouthDA.com, that's one of the ways you can be very transparent. Look at all the things we've been doing regarding kids and also people, keeping people safe, victims safe.
Thank you. Rahsaan?
Yeah, community engagement is very important. That's what I spent the last 4 years doing when I was at the ACLU of Massachusetts on our What a Difference a DA Makes campaign, because we found out 4 out of 10 Massachusetts voters didn't even know the district attorney was an elected position. But then when we educated them on the role, power, and influence of DA, 81% paid more attention to what it is the district attorney does and paid attention to the next district attorney election, which is what I'm hoping people will do this evening. I think it's also important for voters to recognize that when I was out on the doors, I was surprised by how many people said that they didn't know who the current DA was or that there was even a district attorney election. And as far as PlymouthCountyDA.com is concerned, one of the things that I don't see on there is some of the information that the public needs to know about some of the policies or some of the prosecution statistics or data and outcomes. What about the racial disparities that exist in this county? There's no transparency in that.
Any follow-ups?
Can Tim have a moment to respond? Is
Yes.
that acceptable?
Yes.
I mean, all the information as pertains to the data, the racial data, that's all with the trial court. And that's the problem with that stuff, is that the trial court's not subjected to FOIA records. So if you want to get information regarding all that stuff, you could FOIA, or try to FOIA the legislature, which they don't do. Trial court's the same way. You know, what's really good that's coming out of the criminal justice reform is that, Governor Baker has put together a database dashboard that they're going to be bringing out information in the next couple of years. They're starting, next couple of months, I believe. They're already starting with the Department of Correction and the sheriffs, getting all the information from the 9.4 million pieces of documents that they have, getting all these groups together, finding out people that are in the system, what kind of services have they had, and try to look at everybody at a total package. We don't have that right now, but everybody needs to be working together with that, and if you're in that position, you can do that.
Rahsaan, do you have a response?
Middlesex County DA's office is doing it. Suffolk County DA's office started doing it. I sat on the special commission that Governor Baker created to create a cross-agency data tracking system. So yes, it is in the works, but individual district attorneys' offices have the capacity and ability to develop that data and make it publicly available themselves.
30 seconds,
But the
Tim.
DAs can't talk to the defendants. You can't find out. You can get booking reports. You can find out what individuals say to the police, but you can't find out what they say to the probation department. That's where the real information is, to make sure that it's accurate. When you're going to get data, you have to make sure that it's accurate. And the DA's office doesn't have that. So whatever information that Middlesex may be doing or Suffolk may be starting right now, I'm not sure what that is, but we all talk all the time about these issues, and that hasn't been brought up.
No, 30 seconds. Respond. Rahsaan?
But the data is there.
Okay. Let's go now to Charles.
Charles Mathewson, yes, I work
that
with
would be
you.
you. Yes, that's right.
What is the most challenging type of offense that any DA's office faces, and how do you prevent them, Rahsaan?
I think some of the most challenging offenses are offenses that involve children. I think there are some competency issues there with their ability to testify to the harm that they've been subjected to and exposed to, and I think that's why it's really important to make sure that the DA's office is working with well-trained practitioners to service their children that are dealing with those issues. I think it's also important that the voters of Plymouth County understand that there needs to be a commitment to making sure that the prosecutors in the office are well-trained to deal with those types of cases, so those types of offenses do not slip through the cracks.
Tim?
Well, we have our nationally accredited Children's Advocacy Center, which gets reviewed every year to make sure that we're still going to stay nationally accredited. We have sexual assault interviewers that can deal with the kids who are being hurt. We have all sorts of programs going on to try to help those children, make sure we can get them out of the cycles of violence. We need to make sure that we continue to do that. But one other case, which I've always find very disturbing, when you deal with people who are the victims of motor vehicle homicides, and they've lost somebody to a drunk driver or to somebody who is under drugs or whatever, such as that, and they don't understand why those cases aren't being treated as, say, a murder or, say, a manslaughter, because of the fact that they've lost somebody forever, and they're never going to get them back. And how do you make sure that they can get the information? You can tell them that, yes, we know you've lost somebody, but those are very difficult conversations to say. And if it's a negligent motor vehicle homicide, there's not even a guarantee that somebody may go to jail on that stuff. They can get probation on those issues. So it's a real challenge.
Okay. Kevin Touch, we're going to go to you, but we're going to go to lightning round questions too. So start with a lightning round question for our candidates. Remember, it's either yes or no, or 1 or 2 sentences tops, and the reporter will ask you what they want. Remember, lightning.
Program the Plymouth County DA's office has that is one of the best, or program the DA's office lacks and needs. You can pick one of these and explain with 1 to 2 sentences.
Mr. Hall.
Integrity Review Bureau, not just a conviction integrity, but one that looks at the entire trajectory of a case and has auditing ability to look at
Tim Cruz,
cases.
same question.
Yeah, I mean, we continue to work on our best practices, which I was involved with Attorney General Healy and many other groups and individuals trying to do our
sentences.
conviction integrity, sorry.
That's a long
done,
sentence.
I know.
Okay. Donna Rodriguez.
Most important personal, not work, personal accomplishment. And I'm sorry, I lost track. Where did we leave off? Who
Start
starts?
with Tim. 2 sentences.
Raising my boys and trying to be a good father.
Okay. Rahsaan Hall.
Fatherhood and ministry.
Okay. Charlie.
The courts are owned by the county or the state. Which one would you like to impact those two that need work, Rahsaan?
I'm sorry, could you clarify
The
that?
courthouses. Which one needs it the most,
Oh, Wareham.
Tim?
I'd say Wareham and Brockton Superior.
Okay. Kevin.
Top priority if elected or re-elected to office.
Top priority is continuing trying to help the kids in our community, making sure they can stay out of the criminal justice system.
Okay.
Integrity Review Bureau and data collection.
Okay. We're going to go to our closing statements now. We're going to reverse the order from which we started. I believe we started with Tim Cruz and then went to Rahsaan Hall. So we're going to reverse the order now. We're going to start with Rahsaan Hall, then go to Tim Cruz, and closing statements are 1 minute.
Justice demands better, and so do we. There are a number of injustices and miscarriages of justice and wrongful convictions that have come out of this office over the last 2 decades. This district attorney came in at a time when people couldn't be on the internet and their phone at the same time. Times have changed. He hasn't. I have talked to the voters and listeners of WATD about what it is that I will do as the next district attorney of Plymouth County to bring evidence-based reforms and practices that get the best outcomes for our communities. If folks want to learn more about me or what I propose to do, please visit our website, hallforda.com. That's hall, the number 4, DA.com, to find out ways to get involved, support this campaign to reclaim the spirit of justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a closing statement with Rahsaan Hall. Your closing statement from Tim Cruz.
Thanks very much. I just want to say at the outset that the things that I am not for. I am against defunding and abolishing the police. I'm against getting rid of cash bail. I am against getting rid of life without parole for first-degree homicide people. I am against having a list of cases that will not be prosecuted because it does not work. We don't have that here. Yet the Plymouth County remains in the 99th percentile of safest counties in America because of that. We work together. All the endorsements that regarding the police are with me, the fire's with me, PFFM's with me, people that used to work with my opponent, Willie Gross is with me, Ed Davis is with me, the Boston Patrolmen are with me because they understand what we're doing down here is working, keeping people safe. So I humbly respect and respectfully ask the voters of Plymouth County to return me back to this office so we can make sure we keep people safe.
Thank you very much. That was closing statement with Tim Cruz. You've been listening to a political forum. The candidates for Plymouth County District Attorney, the incumbent Tim Cruz, his challenger Rahsaan Hall. This is going to be up on our website. You can listen to that, and we have selected cuts you can hear tomorrow morning. And of course, make sure you vote. If you don't vote, you don't have a voice. I'm Christine James, 95.9 WATD.